having a 25%. I think we were at 38%, if I remember correctly, in the audit. I'd have to get it to find out to quote that correctly, but in my brain, I think it was like 38%.
And I know that our severance tax payment, our most recent one, was down significantly from what we got. What were we expecting?
So I'm only budgeting next year for what we got this year.
And so okay, so I know there was a projection in your head as to what we were going to get. And we only got, what, 8,000?
No, we had budgeted 8,000, we got 5.
Okay, so we're $3,000 behind. And that primarily comes from what, the money? Okay.
And that's just seeing the slowdown of the mine production.
Okay, thank you.
It has something to do with, the severance part of it has to do with the employees that live. Bill, can you correct me if I'm wrong? But I believe that the severance piece has to do with where the employees live. The mineral leasing is created or comes from the production, coal production.
There's a combination of both of those.
Any other questions?
Yeah. The tank lining is listed where I can see that.
It's under the capital, it's in the bottom, the third section on the sheet that's in the packet. So the first section is revenue. The second section, it starts with payroll, that is operating expenses, and then the third is total discretionary spending. And when I say discretionary spending, you can choose to or not to do those things.
No.
Bill is included in that 695,000.
Okay. Do we have any kind of estimate, like contractor or supplier estimate on that cost?
I'm sorry, what was
Right.
that?
Do we have any, we have a number for the tank lining, and we explore the contractors to get a budgeted price, or we just pull that one out from past experience?
That was a quote that I got from the same kind of lining that we have in the room.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Yeah, Michelle.
Madam Mayor, excuse me.
You can go ahead, I'm trying to get this
We'd like to have a discussion brief on potential revenue increases, fee increases in our enterprise funds, specifically to garner funds for our matching requirement when we go after these grants. So if you have any thoughts about that, we're probably going to need to generate about $100,000
Okay.
approximately.
Okay, so what I would suggest, Ross, is that we go ahead and field any questions from the board, and then we'll open it up for that specific discussion, okay?
Okay. First question is there any way for us to get access to the budget area where we can drill down into the details? I know you use Excel as a proprietary software, right?
Yes, I believe that's the intent of the software that's going to be working with that is it
ClearBells?
ClearBells, yeah, I was saying municipal bell, ClearBells, that they will have that capability when it's uploaded, where you will be able to see more detail in that.
Okay.
So you recall at the last meeting, you guys requested to see the big picture. This is the big picture. This is a balanced budget. You're seeing revenue, you're seeing expenditures, and you're seeing capital outlay. You're seeing the history of the revenue and the percentage of change of those revenues. So I provided the big picture as you guys requested at the, yes, I have an extremely detailed version. If you require that, we can provide it.
It sounds like with some difficulty.
Can you mail?
Is there a specific area that you'd like to see the detail of?
Not any one thing specifically. It sounds like the ClearGov solution will kind of get me to what I'm looking for. Do we have an update on where we're at with that?
I have a meeting tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. So my question specifically on the budget is if you could provide a little more detail on miscellaneous income and what's included in that.
Miscellaneous income?
Mm-hmm.
Which number?
So it's line 35, interest or miscellaneous income, and there is some income in that line, and
Tell me the number at the top again, I'm sorry.
Line 35, and what department, or just across the board?
what is it cost up there, because we've got miscellaneous in a number of departments.
Which, so at the top you have your department numbers, 10, 12, 14.
Mm-hmm.
Which one are you looking at?
10, 15, 20, all the ones that have miscellaneous income.
Oh.
I'm just wondering what feeds into that. If that's something that would be easier to provide later in writing, that's okay too.
Well, it's, what goes into there? Interest, other income, like if we sell copies or, they send a fax, any potential contributions, I don't budget anything for refund of expenditures, but that is under there. The restitution is under there. And that's under 10, under
That's Department 10.
14, that's gonna be, other agencies and the school resource officer. Under 16, that's gonna be things like the rentals of the parks and this room, park contributions, grant revenue, other agency contributions. Streets is gonna be motor vehicle, fuel tax refund. I think that should be it.
So in
What is the pass-through, which is 30, that is the 200,000 for the skate park potential pass-through grant, and they're working on a potential pass-through grant with Lone Cabin, and that's 260,000. Those are just pass-throughs though. They get the grant, they do the work, they process it, they send us the money, I turn around and send it to them. So it's not real revenue to us, it's simply pass-through. We're just a pass-through, but you still have to budget that for the rules. Does that help? Does that answer your question?
That is all, thank you. So my other question is on, I lost the line, give me a minute, sorry. Under capital outlay, there's also the department, which is 22, I'm not sure what X capital stands for.
22 is the street capital.
Street capital.
That's the money that you have, so we started that impact fee, and that is the money that it can only be used for street capital improvement, not maintenance or anything else, which is 20 is our streets, that's maintenance, but this is just for street. So this is where that, if the marijuana passes, this is where that money will go. It will only, because you designated it to only be used for street capital improvement.
Okay.
So that's not included in.
No, there's no.
It will be in November if it passes, but, I don't know that I would even, that's gonna be hard to budget the first year because we have no anything to relate it to.
And it's a time, that's a timely process, so even if it passes, it doesn't actually pass and go into effect until January. And so, right, and so the amount of time it takes for someone to apply for a license to the state and go to a local, is pretty extensive. So it's really difficult to know, first of all, I haven't heard anyone, no one's come forward with an interest to be the first shop in town, should it pass. But we have to get that first, someone who wants to do that business model within the limits and then establish, get all their licensing and everything. So it very well may be that we don't see any real revenues, if any, the first year.
So you'll notice there, under the street capital, oops, I'm looking at the wrong sheet, sorry. So you'll see, the Travis wants to do two blocks for reconstruct, because we gotta take it all the way down, redo the grades and everything, and the sidewalk curb and gutter. That's about $312,000, and so we're short, about $173,000. If we would get it, we can either do the last 6 months as matching funds, or we can if we happen to collect that much, that would be what it would go for, is to reconstruct the 2 blocks of 3rd Street.
Dave, you put your hand up.
I'm curious, like last year when we did the budget, we did not include an assumption that back-to-back would pass. Why are we doing it this year?
We did actually, the first budget you got did include back-to-back, and then when it failed, I pulled it and gave you the budget without it. Basically what back-to-back, that $150,000 is going to provide is equipment, like our cameras for all the officers, a new officer and a new vehicle.
Yeah, I guess my question isn't about that, it's just about the general process that we're using. That, we decided not to include it in the municipality initiative, and then back-to-back, we decided to include it, because it's inconsistent.
Because I have been given an amount for back-to-back that they have determined that I can expect, so therefore I can budget it. Back the marijuana, I have no reference point or any data to determine the revenue, so I don't have a way to budget that.
It's the known quantity versus the unknown quantity. We know what the increase to sales tax based on 0.08% would look like across the county. We don't know what the implementation and operation start date would be, or the number of transactions that we would see to generate that transaction tax.
I'm just talking about general principle of budgeting. But I would prefer that we don't budget assuming things are passing, regardless of whether we know the estimates are there or not. That's all the comment I'm making, is that I'm just more comfortable myself personally with budgets that don't assume things pass. And then if they do pass, then great. But if they don't pass, so that's my comment.
Yeah, I kind of echo that. My memory last year, it was really painful when that batch didn't pass and the cuts that we had to make and how hard that process was in retrospect. It would be possible, and I don't know if this is just too much work for you, Cindy, to have a public safety line with it and then without it so that we could choose depending on what the ballot initiative comes out as.
I intended to provide the, breakdown of what makes up that 150,000. But unfortunately, this morning I had a severe migraine and was not able to put as much time into that today as I was hoping for. So I apologize for that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah.
Now, I understood earlier in the conversation that you have found some salary increases into your number.
Yes, if you look at page 7, the second line, it says increases, 74,204. That includes new employees are hired at one rate, and then after 6 months, they are hired with an increase. That increase is in the increases. Their initial wage is in wages. Would you like me to go through the process that I and the Finance Committee went through to determine?
Well, I'd like to understand how you generated the raises.
Okay, so first we pulled the 300 pages of the CML salary survey. We then went through the section that shows us the county or each town's size, number of employees, and budget amount. And I pulled out the ones that were most closely matched to us in those 3 categories. I also included all of Delta County. Delta, Cedar Edge, Hotchkiss, and Paonia were all also included because that's who we're competing with. I did a spreadsheet of every position for every one of those counties that reported. Also, they report, some positions are reported, it's the same position, but they call it something different. So I went through and consolidated those so that I had all of that information. So I had, then I went through those and picked, averaged them. Then I picked the highest community and the lowest community. And then between, from those, we determined a range. So the range would be from the lowest community reporting to the highest community reporting that is not a ski resort, that is not anything like that, they have the same or similar number of residents, similar amount of budget, similar number of employees. And then I did a spreadsheet of those highs and lows over a 23-year period, because we do have some employees that have been here that long. And then I put in from the low would be the higher rate, And then, every other year, a 2 to 3% cost of living increase. Put that cost of living increase in there, and then I charted, where all of our employees per those jobs, their current payroll rate, and then I, figured out how many years they've been with the town and how many years they've been in the current position that they were doing. And then I marked in that chart of the 23 years where they fell in that job, and then determined the increases from there, to get everybody within their range, where they should fall within their range for the time they've been here. And that, it was absolutely used straight across the board, the same for every single employee, every single position, and that's how it was determined.
Okay, follow-up question on that. We talked about having to increase enterprise funds revenue to pay for the upcoming capital project, okay? How much are the enterprise funds going to get increased to pay for the additional wages? Because I don't, other than marijuana,
right across there, how it's allocated.
So the increases, when I'm looking at that page with the labor, and I look at increases, I'm going to see water gets raised $8,151.
Yes. Which is very minimal, and that won't even, it's about paying the employee, or at least budgeting our employees for replacement. We just replaced the judge at a significant increase. We replaced a park person with a significant increase. We want to increase the officers so that we can compete with the other agencies, so that Neil's not hiring an officer. We're paying $5,000 to $10,000 to hire the officer, and then they're gone to sheriff's department because they can make twice as
But
much.
the officer salary doesn't come out of the enterprise funds.
No, it comes out of law. You can see that's where the majority of the increase is.
So about 26,000, 27,000 more for enterprise funds for labor. That's correct.
Yes. So, enterprise funds pay for, the office staff. It pays for the, and then, water and sewer is the two people. The, streets, parks, and trash are
Well, streets and parks don't come out of the enterprise.
That's correct.
I just was more concerned about the enterprise funds, how much the increase is going to be, and how much is out.
The analysis that Cindy will be providing at the next meeting, she is doing it now to determine what the level of matching funds we might need. Salaries are not included in that. That's under the existing fee structure. These numbers are included.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, we have a set fee right now for our water, sewer, and trash.
Correct.
Okay, we're going to have to, you indicated that we have to raise them at some amount, and because of a couple of issues. One is the salaries, and the second one is because of the need to line the tank. I wanted to get a feel for what the salaries, and I see that, thank you for pointing that out.
I'm saying that the increases are not salary related. The increases are capital project related.
Yeah, I think that. And I would like to see a side-by-side comparison, which I don't need tonight, but of the employees in each one's, how much are you running into their increases.
So this might be a good segue into a discussion of the need to raise rates to cover the grant matching funds in the enterprise funds.
And I was just going to make one comment toward the request to have a line item side by side for each individual department, that while I don't have any objection with providing that, the issue and conversation that I had with finance and personnel specific to this was that what tends to happen naturally is that we start talking about individual employees in individual positions below the level that the board is directly responsible for setting salaries for. Overall budget absolutely is board decision and board discretion. So I would request that respectfully that we provide you a breakdown for the individuals that you directly or based on department. How much would be for each department, but not necessarily really for each individual employee.
There are people who really like their supervisor, and they turn their salary, of course, we know that's the police chief, the county administrator, the judge. I think those are the three we control. As a public body, we can look overall at how much money we need to allocate for raises, and then that's where our administrator, she, in her best judgment, then allocates that amount. So we might look at that and say, wait a minute, $50,000 in increases is way too much, we can't afford that. We can only afford $215,000 in increases this year, correct? That's all you get. And then she has to decide how that's spread out.
Yes, Michelle.
So one thing that I think would be helpful would be to see a summary of all of our accounts as budgeted, directly compared to what they were budgeted for 2020 and the difference in those. I looked at the numbers while Bill was asking about the salary, and it looks like our difference from our 2020 salary budget to our 2021 salary budget is about $207,000. So I think on all of our lines, seeing those differences and then hearing from staff about what's included in those differences would help the board make those big picture decisions.
It's the 4 people plus the 1 policeman, is that correct? The 4 people plus the 1 person?
The new people? That would be the Evan replacement. This does include a town administrator and a town clerk, because you only extended a contract through May. I have to budget for a whole year, so then I got no direction, so I had to budget. I budgeted half a year for the whole year for a town administrator and half a year for a clerk. Deputy clerk, a utilities, public works clerk, an assistant clerk, which is what would replace Evan. You have the chief, the sergeant, 3 officers, and a SRO/officer, and a judge. And then judge's increase that was potentially negotiated at the time is in here. That's in that increase number. Public works director and a utility assistant. The utility assistant actually is starting this year. The public works supervisor and a trash driver, a trash laborer, and 2 other laborers is what makes up the Public Works Department and the trustees. That is what makes up the payroll.
Those trustees are really costly.
And the treasurer.
Yeah,
But he's well worth it.
budget, we are at a deficit of $691,550 in the water department. And that's primarily because we do have to line the tank. Now, how much, so looking at a $500,000 tank line, just wild guess projection, how much of a grant do you think we can get to cover that?
For all of these, I'm gonna say the best we're gonna get from my experience is matching 125%, or 25% of the total is what matching funds will need to be.
So 25% of what number?
The total.
The 500,000?
Well, if you're only talking about the tank line in the town, we have to come up with the 25%, but
Okay.
even with all of the water projects in there, there's just under 700,000, it'd be 25% of that.
So we have to find 25% of 695,000, or 695,000, which mathematical people, can you help me give me a figure what that number is?
Maybe it's 173,000.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah.
So Ross, you have a proposal as to,
No. I just want to, board to be aware,
okay,
if they pursue all these capital projects, you will be needing to anticipate generating some revenue to be able to provide the matching funds. That was my point.
okay. Yeah,
So Lynn and I have also looked at this and discussed it, and so, there's several things that are gonna have to happen, and there's, different options. We have, one option is to raise the rates to cover it. Another option is to layer funding. Another option is to sell some more revenue bonds. And then there's probably a fourth option that I'm hoping somebody that knows way more about this part of it than me can help me figure out. But there are layering potential where we can layer grants and use grants to as matching funds for grants. We've done that in the past with that $6 million project. We layered those. So there is layering opportunities. When I was working with doing that water project, there was a gentleman from DOLA that was very helpful, and I intend to reach out to him and get some advice on potential layering or and to have our overall borrowing power analyzed. I don't think at this time that we're in a position where we can't afford to borrow any more money, but I think it's in our best interest to have it analyzed to determine where we are exactly in borrowing capability.
no,
Could you, on the water projects, could you have a list of priorities on the different projects? If we had to tear some of the projects out of the budget?
So that $25,000 for engineering of raw water storage. Oh, your priority of these.
What's one?
What are your
If
priorities?
you had to tear down the ordinance, what would be the priority?
These four items are here.
My raw water storage, we would be probably one of the main ones. Then your tank lining would be the second one. And then your two main ones.
What was that one?
Your two main line replacements.
Okay, and, the raw water storage was 25,000?
Yes,
That's just the engineering.
Yes, I understand. The tank lining,
500,000.
500,000. And the other two main lines are,
300 block of Orchard is 80,000, and 200 block of Main is 90,000. Sorry.
and of those four projects, you believe your raw water storage is most important, followed by tank lining?
I believe so.
And that raw water storage, is that expanding over?
That is one of the options I was looking at.
I think the study would be to determine the best way to go on that, wouldn't it? Am I reading that correctly?
What's that, sir?
That your study would determine
Yes.
the best way to go?
Yes.
Michelle?
Go ahead.
How old is the tank line?
How old is it?
Mhm.
60.
16.
16 years? And what's the normal life for the tank liner?
The company, when I talked to them, they said it was, they guaranteed it for 6 months.
Of the two streets, which one would you find to be most important to do if you were to rank them?
Main,
Main.
I'd be my first,
Okay.
and then Orchard. The tank lining that I'm looking at now, they have a minimum of 25-year life.
Okay, so that's the new one, that's not the one we have now.
Yeah, the lining that I'm looking at, they'll guarantee it for 25 years.
Okay. Kind of what I'm getting at is whether that's a project that could be budgeted over several years rather than going all in this year to reduce our expenses.
We initially, Travis and I anticipated that it was going to be over the next 3 to 5 years, so we were to start this year, starting to save and set aside for the matching. But after the tank inspection that just happened last month, they did find that there's some sections that are in worse shape than was anticipated. And so that brought our timeline up to a 1 to 3 year before the state comes in and says you have to replace it. And again, those are just estimations, it's not, we haven't been told that. So our intent was that we needed to start really taking big bites out of that, so that whether it was 1 year of building matching funds so that year 2 we can go for grants, or so we can start building that. And that is a conversation we're also going to have with DOLA, with Kimberly in the near future as well, about opportunities there for grants too, and what, if any of the requirements are changing with them in light of COVID, the way they are with some of the grant entities.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand, the 500,000 that's budgeted right now, that is the full expected cost, and that's not just a portion of the 3-year expense. Okay, thank you.
It's my understanding that the sooner we do that, the less likely we are to pay more down the road, isn't that correct? Couldn't it end up costing a lot more if we don't get that done in a really timely manner?
Yes.
In addition, keep in mind when we do go through the grant process, it's a lengthy process. It's not like we file for, there's deadlines and then we have to wait and wait. And then once we get, and in order to layer them, it takes longer because you have to wait to get the approval for the one before you can apply for the second one to layer on top of it. So I believe when we did the water project, that was 3 years
of putting that funding together.
So, sorry, final question on this topic. Would it be possible for us to budget for the 2021 budget strictly the matching funds that we expect to need for those grant applications, with the anticipation that the project wouldn't begin due to grant cycles, due to the time involved until 2022, at which time we would budget the remainder that's not grant funded, just spreading it out over one additional year?
Technically, that's what we're doing, but we're putting the outlay in there as money we know we are gonna have to spend, and then what will end up in the budget is, where we end up at the end of this discussion. The budget will show where we end up at so it'll show the grant funds as the revenue, because you'll notice there's no grant funds in there this time. Or there's no rate increases in there either. So when we get done with these discussions, then what comes out of these discussions is what will make up the budget. Does that make sense?
Kind of. I'm good with that.
So my understanding of this is even, are taking everything into consideration. The numbers that we're looking at tonight, we are $1,113,315 over budget, just with the figures we're looking at tonight. Is that correct?
I think you're insinuating that all of these items are going to be approved in the budget.
Oh, yeah, I know, I'm just saying that preliminary figures, I mean, that's all we're looking at, and so it's kind of a basis to where we need to start looking at changing things.
That's correct. The town is not in a position to attempt to complete all these capital.
Oh, gosh, no. No, and we can't, we have to have a balanced budget anyway, so we can't rely.
I'd like to just make it for Michelle. Let's just look at the revenue that we generated from the water department. If we thought we could get our matching funds through a rate increase, we would have to increase rates approximately $170,000. That would be about a 20% rate increase if you compare. And I don't think this board is prepared to approach the community with a 20% water rate increase to generate the additional $170,000. Did I explain that?
Yes, that makes sense, but I agree with your assessment.
I'm trying to give some, just in my own opinion, some top level guidance. When citizens look at our budget and they look at the amount of increases we have, I think it's going to be very difficult for us to be able to justify them rate increases when we just did rate increases last year. So at least in my opinion, we should try as much as possible to avoid any kind of utility rate increases and figure out how else can we get this money or how else can we leverage other funds to get that money and decide which are our priorities. So that's just a high level, that's what you're asking us for. So in my mind, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, okay.
Do we have anyone working on grants for any of these?
We haven't started on grants for these particular projects yet, no. There's lots of grants that are open and active and going, but nothing for this yet.
We do have to determine the project before we can start getting grants.
Sure. But I think it would be good if we had someone to pursue that, because obviously we have a lot of items here that we need to pursue.
One thing I would add, sorry, Bill.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to add, again, with the conversation about rate increases, which is never a fun conversation. We had this last year as well, that with all good intentions, but coming right out of audit and straight into budget, there's really not a window to start these conversations earlier in the year. But one of the conversations last year that was had at the time when we did the increases was that historically Paonia goes long periods of time without addressing any increase, and then we have to do large increases. And so a lot of that conversation last year and a lot of the feedback that I've received in communication on the listserv with other municipalities and other town managers and town clerks is that they tend to, the board majority tend to do incremental increases almost on a yearly basis. But they're less impactful, they're smaller, and it's easier for people to digest and budget when those conversations are happening over a longer period of time. And it's really clear that, especially in a situation where our boundaries are not increasing, our population and our tax area is not increasing, but costs continue to increase. Building supplies alone, I've heard new numbers recently that cost to build is almost double. So for those materials, for wood, for things like that. So remembering that and addressing that, the fact that our tax basis and our revenue-based income is not going to substantially and exponentially grow and increase every year, but costs will. And so looking at long-term and making those small increases and small plans over a longer period of time, I think is a better approach for the town. Bill?
You might have already answered this, I missed it, but can we build the necessary matching fund for the water tank over a number of years? Does it have to be all done in 21?
You can, you just have to have the funds when you apply for the grant. You can't apply for a grant that requires matching funds without proof that you have them. It can't be based on the potential for income to come at a later date.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm missing it in the document we have tonight. What are our reserves currently and where do we anticipate them to be for 2021? I know we're shooting for around 25%, but I don't have the numbers in front of me.
I do not currently have that available.
Okay.
The reserves, if you go back to your audit, that will tell you what our reserves were at 19.
Okay.
It's in the audit.
2019.
2019 audit, yeah.
Thank you. And in what situation would we use funds from the reserve? So what?
It's different for each fund. So, administration, building, public safety, parks, streets, those are, I'm going to call those are a general fund balance requirement. Capital was designated funds, had to be used for designated purpose, that's why it has its own fund. So using those reserves is using those funds that were set aside for that particular purpose. The bridge is the same thing, sidewalks is the same thing. Pass-through is literally, like we talked earlier, pass-through of grant funds. And that there'll be no reserves for pass-through because as soon as I get the money, it goes out to whomever. Space to create is another one that has its purpose and its reserve will be used for that purpose. Conservation trust and capital, again, those are specific purposes. So those, those reserves are already designated for a project. It can be reallocated if you chose, but at this time, those funds have already been allocated. The reserves in the capital have been designated for previous years. So if you look at the capital sheet that I gave you, which is page 8, you'll see the top half is prior years and the bottom half is the 2021 requests. So the reserves have already been allocated, and it's just waiting for the appropriate time or something about that project is holding it up, so haven't gotten there yet, but it's already been allocated. You may if you decide, which we have done, like this year, you guys reallocated the building code money to pay for the tree analysis. So then, so that's been reallocated. And then we'll have to go back and pull money again for the building code upgrade. Water, sewer, and trash are the reserves that, so there's multi-facets of that. There's one, we already have debt, and they have reserve requirements. And which we are working to get to those reserve requirements because we got below those reserve requirements in the past. So one, we have to keep those reserve requirements per that debt service we already have. Then any new debt could have its own reserve requirements. And then third, sorry, lost that thought. But it's going to come back here in a moment. Yeah.
Given the fact that the new tank line is going to have a 25-year life, or somewhere to that, I mean, they'd have to keep that back. Why would that not be a capital expenditure? Why couldn't we use capital dollars to do it?
Are you talking about this the capital improvement under number 50? Because that's general, that's sales tax revenue, and you cannot use sales tax revenue to fund enterprise funds.
Well, I was thinking too, if we talk about increases at all, we did increase trash, so, perhaps that's one way to go. The other thing, looking at water, is to change our tiered system and keep the lower levels where they are, and then increase the major usage instead, which will bring us revenue without really hurting the little guys who are really struggling to get by, so that their water rates will really go up. But somebody who's using 100,000 gallons a month would have to pay a significantly larger amount. All right, well, I think we're going to do this for 3 more minutes, and we're going to take a 15-minute break before we start the regular meeting. So if there's other bubbling questions, now is the time to hear it. Yeah, Rob?
I'd just like to, from my perspective, reality here. These capital expenditures for the water system, if you were working in normal industry, mining or whatever, utility, you would have been booking depreciation over a number of years to have the capital accumulated so you could accomplish these tasks. Municipalities don't have that luxury. And I'll just tell you, I personally don't see how we can approach all these type of projects without some realization that there's gonna have to be an increase in fees. And I'll let it go with that.
Yes, Michelle.
So one other thing I would like to see when we're reviewing this, and I don't know whether this is feasible or not, this is sort of a wish list thing, would be, we've talked about some of a number of the funds and a number of the line items that really are not something that we as a board can adjust. Things that are committed funds, the reserves that we're required to hold, things like that. It would be nice to see that in some way separated out, so that it's easier to tell what we actually have to work with in terms of moving money around to meet our goals. Does that make sense?
So, on that sheet that you were provided, that information is there. You have your revenue at the top, so you go down to total revenue. You have your total operating expenditures. That is what it is. And it's budgeted on a historic basis. And then the wiggle room, shall we say, is that third section.
But don't we also have wiggle room within the operating expense categories? To an extent. And I know there are some places where we don't, but to see those separated out would, just for me personally, would help me make decisions.
So when you say separate it out, you have utilities, you have, how do you want them separate? I'm not clear on how you want them separated out. The fixed costs are the operating costs. And there is potentially some room in there for, so we might not order some office supplies that we need. We're talking a couple $100 that you might have in wiggle room. We're not talking, there's nothing in, we don't have that $170-some thousand worth of wiggle room in any of it. Do you see what I'm saying? The fixed costs are operating costs. So those are going to be your utilities, your historic repairs and maintenance, it's your postage, it's your supplies, it's your insurance, those things that are not, yes, we can, and all the staff is incredible at trying to keep costs as low as possible. But when you have a water leak and you need a $3,000 part, you're buying a $3,000 part. So it's not like if we can budget $5,000 and we need two $3,000 parts, we can't say, oh, we only have $5,000 budgeted, we can only spend $5,000. Do you see what I'm saying? If we don't have to spend it, we're not going to spend it. But I'm talking that there's hundreds of dollars in there wiggle room, not thousands.
Okay.
But if but what I'm hearing that you guys want to see the raw down to every penny detail?
No, if we can get it online via the new software, but how long before the new software is actually
I don't know
on
what
software?
Thursdays, what they're
Okay.
thinking.
Yeah, because I don't want to see it.
I don't think it's gonna drill down to the detail you guys are asking.
Well, I would hate to kill a bunch of trees to give us that in paper form.
It's 57 pages.
Right, times
Yep.
7 bucks, and that's a lot, that's all over in the paper, that's ludicrous. So if there's a way to do it online, that would be probably the best solution, so that those people who are interested can drill down those people who don't want that much detail don't have to. Is that a possibility?
I will investigate that.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. All right, well, it's 18 minutes after, if you don't want to go to the bathroom. All right, one last cookie, Michelle.
Okay, sorry, one more. I just want to try to say that in a different way. I know there's some wiggle room in some places, and then there are places where there's certainly not any wiggle room whatsoever because of our regulations. Would it be possible for staff to present, like, the minimum acceptable and the preferred level for each, I don't know if I mean each line item or each department, just to give us a better sense of where we can move things around to meet our priorities.
Let me investigate that.
Okay. All right, well, I call this session over and come back in 11 minutes.
Well, I thought we were gonna get rid of them. But they're not going on that.
Oh, really? Oh, no. Something small, yeah.
They're gonna go someplace in a week, but, yeah. Not even anyone's decision.
Yeah. Is this supposed to clear them?
I wanted to go to the show, but the first, preliminary,
Windy.
Maybe next year.
Here's where they were going.
This is